This video kicks off our immunology block. So we break up the immune system into the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. Oftentimes they work together, but they share some things in common. Both of them have immune cells that go in and attack pathogens, baddies, and both of them have to release proteins and cytokines to coordinate that attack, to make sure your cells go where it needs to go, to recruit the cells that are needed, right? So it coordinates that. Those are the two major things that you need to know for our immunology block. You gotta know the types of cells and what they do, and you gotta know the types of cytokines and inflammatory mediators and what they do. Let's talk about the innate immune system first. Now, before we talk about the cells, you actually have other things in your innate immune system. How about your skin? Doesn't your skin help block a lot of pathogens from getting into your blood, or how about your mucous membranes? So, all right, skin, mucous membranes, but we're not really concerned about that. There's more talk about immunology and immune cells. The immune cells in your innate immune system are going to be your neutrophils, your macrophages, and your natural killer cells. And these cells will go in and destroy bacteria no matter what they are, and they will do it pretty quickly. So these cells activate immediately. Your innate immune system is really good for immediate attack against pathogens. Your skin's immediate, right? As soon as a pathogen hits your skin, that's immediate. And then these cells also act very, very quickly. And these cells can detect pathogens with special receptors called toll-like receptors, or sometimes pattern recognition receptors, where they will attach onto bacteria, realize, hey, this is not one of our cells, this is bad, and will go and destroy it. So they detect these things. They detect these kind of molecular patterns that are only associated with pathogens. We call these pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs. They detect these abnormal things found only in pathogens. For example, gram negatives have something called lipopolysaccharides. You might just know it as LPS. What it has is a part of fat, polysaccharide, and then an O antigen at the end. It is seen in gram-negative cells, and sure enough, these cells will detect that and say, that's not normal. That must be bacteria, I'm going to destroy it immediately. How about your gram-positives? Your gram-positives have something called lipoteichoic acid. You can also detect flagellin, which is a protein found in flagella. A lot of bacteria have flagella, right, for mobility. And then you can lastly just detect nucleic acid, or RNA, that are seen in viruses or other bacteria that your body recognizes. This is not part of our RNA, I'm going to destroy it. So these cells will detect it and destroy. Now these cells kind of destroy indiscriminately. They don't really adapt. So I'll say don't adapt, and they don't change. Because they're pretty static, you can pass it on generation to generation. All right, heritable. And that's good and bad. If your innate immune system is really good against fighting bug A, then you can pass that on and your son will be really good at fighting bug A. But if your innate immune system is really bad at fighting bug A, you'll pass that on and your son will be bad at fighting bug A. So it passes down immunity and also passes down resistance. Okay. Sometimes it might say your innate immune system is germ-line encoded. That means it's heritable. All right. So don't get thrown off. So that's our talk about the cells of your immune system. That's the first part. And then the second part, I said you have to really be comfortable with the cytokines and the proteins that are released during this time. That helps coordinate all the cells, tells it where to go. Okay. So, all right, proteins. I'm not going to go into detail about it here. It'll be in our subsequent videos, but that's going to be our second part of this. Right? So you got to know the immune cells, and then you got to know the cytokines and what they do. That's your innate immune system. Let's talk about your adaptive immune system. Adaptive. Your adaptive immune system is your your T cells. Okay. They call them your T cells because they're made in the bone marrow and they go to your thymus, where they mature. T for thymus. They call them your B cells because they're made in your bone marrow and they stay in your bone marrow and mature there. B for bone marrow. Now your T cell is probably the most important in your adaptive immune system, really coordinates everything. T cells just kind of lie dormant, and chill, and they wait until your B cells and your macrophages find a pathogen and proteins associated with that pathogen and say, something's wrong. I got a big shot of T cells. So it takes that antigen, goes to your T cells and presents it. Say, hey, something's wrong here. I need your help. Your T cells will spring awake, activate, and then really, really coordinate the adaptive immune system. We'll talk about the T cells in this video. Your B cells are also very important. They're not just there to present stuff to your T cells. They have a bigger role. They make your immunoglobulins. Those are your IgG, IgA, IgE, IgM, all that stuff. Those are very important for destroying pathogens. So it goes and destroys the pathogens, makes those immunoglobulins, as well as present anything to the T cell. Also, a subgroup will lie back and wait, and become your memory cells. So that the second time you encounter this pathogen, it'll spring up and say, I've encountered this before, I know exactly what to do, and it will activate your immune system faster. It says, this isn't my first rodeo, I've seen this pathogen before, I know exactly what to do. So it's activate faster. Yeah. And faster is relative because your adaptive immune system takes longer. It's not going to be immediate like your innate immune system. Your adaptive immune system, I mean, you need things to present to your T cells. Your T cells need to activate. Your B cells need to make immunoglobulins, make memory cells. So it takes a while. It takes longer. Right? So it's not going to be immediate. But the payoff is that it always adapts, always changes. If you present pathogen A, your T cells will attack pathogen A. If you present pathogen C, it will attack and change and attack pathogen C. So it adapts and changes. The bad thing is, because it's constantly changing, constantly moving, constantly adapting, you can't really pass it on to your kid. So it's not heritable. Heritable? You don't pass it on. All right, don't pass it on. I need to read more books. Holy moly. So you don't pass it on. So it's not germline encoded. That's just them saying you don't pass it on. Let's talk about your adaptive immune system first. And in fact, we're going to talk about your T cells first. We say your T cells are so important in coordinating your adaptive immune system. Why not just talk about it in our first video? You have many different types of T cells. And we know you have different types of T cells because they have different surface proteins on them called clusters of differentiation. CD proteins. CD. Right? So we saw this and we found out that this was CD4, so we just called this a CD4 T cell. We saw this and saw this was CD8, so we call this a CD8 T cell. It is important because these have different functions. CD8 T cells are your cytotoxic T cells. These are the T cells that go out and destroy things. They're toxic to cells, cytotoxic. CD4s are a little bit less violent. These are going to be your CD4 helper T cells. They're going to be your managers. They're going to stay back and coordinate the attack. Okay, these cells need to go here. I need to make more of these cells. I need to make less of these cells. They kind of coordinate everything. These are your helper T cells. Got it? There are different types of helper T cells. There's Th1, which we'll talk about. T helper 2, which we'll talk about. And then one that many people don't know, regulatory T cells. Regulatory T cells. Your regulatory T cells have CD4. I mean, it is under this category, right? Also has CD25 and a surface protein FOXP3. And your regulatory T cells gets its name because it regulates the immune function. I mean, we're encountering a pathogen, everything's getting revved up, your T cells are activated, they're attacking stuff, your B cells are activating, they're making immunoglobulins, they're making memory cells, everything's attacking. But sooner or later, your body will clear that pathogen and your body needs to say, okay, I'm done. I need to stop everything. I need to regulate and decrease my inflammation, my adaptive immune system. And does it with your regulatory T cells. It releases IL-10, TGF-beta. You need to remember these two. This decreases inflammation. They give you a question asking what kind of cytokines, what kind of proteins are released to decrease inflammation. Look at the answer choice for these. I have gotten questions on those. All right, like I said, you gotta know the cells and what they do, and then what they release and what these do. IL-10, TGF-beta, decrease inflammation. Those are the only two that decrease inflammation that you really need to know cold. So it's not a ton of information, right? So just know those cold. If you have a mutation in FOXP3, sometimes CD25, but mostly FOXP3, then you have something wrong with your regulatory cells. What do you think can happen if something's wrong with this? Well, you have non-stop inflammation, so you can get an autoimmune condition called IPEX syndrome. The full name will be in my notes, but just know this is an X-linked disorder due to a mutation in FOXP3, and it changes your regulatory cells. So these are your T cells. Now we said that your T cells are activated when your B cells and your macrophages present antigens to them and say, hey, there's something wrong, we need your help, and they will activate. Well, how about your other cells? How about your non-B cells? How about your non-macrophages? Don't they have a role? They do. They absolutely do. They can signal to your T cells that there's something wrong, and they do it via a surface protein called MHC, or major histocompatibility complex. MHC. And it presents abnormal antigens to your T cell. Says, hey, there's something wrong here. I need your help. I need your help. Now your MHCs are encoded by your HLAs. That's a lot of letters. HLA stands for human leukocyte antigen gene. All right, this codes for these special receptors that present to your T cells. Right. Present to your C cells. Now you may have heard of HLAs. You know that certain HLAs are associated with autoimmune disease, like HLA-B27 is associated with ankylosing spondylitis. Now you know why. Some certain subtypes, I guess, code for receptors that don't work as well, and you have autoimmune activation of your T cells and destroy your own body. But we're not going to get into that. We're just going to talk about regular things here. We're going to talk about regular HLA. We're going to talk about regular MHCs. We break it up into two categories. You have MHC class 1. Encoded by HLA-A, HLA-B, HLA-C. And then you have MHC class 2. Encoded by HLA-DP, DQ, D. And this is easy enough to remember. HLA-ABC, that's one letter. Codes for MHC1. DP, DQ, DR, that's two letters. Codes for MHC2. Okay. Now your special antigen presenting cells, your B cells, your macrophages have this. Antigen presenting cells. But like I said, all your other cells, they also play a role. So they have this. All other cells. Except for red blood cells. They don't have that. Right. So all these cells can pick up an antigen, go to your T cell and say, hey, there's something wrong. We need your help. We need you to activate. Let's talk about MHC class 1 first. So here's your cell. And the structure of MHC class 1, you have this long chain made up of alpha units. So all right, long chain. Then you have this little goober, that's your beta-2 microglobulin. Long chain plus beta-2. And it presents endogenous proteins. Abnormal endogenous proteins. That means proteins inside of it. It says, hey, that's not a normal protein. I should tell my T cell that. And so what happens is that this protein gets broken down by a proteasome. So it gets broken down. And moves into your rough endoplasmic reticulum via a transporter called TAP. So it goes into your rough endoplasmic reticulum where it's loaded onto a receptor. is loaded onto a receptor, and this receptor will move up to the top. Move up to the top, and now you have your antigen on this receptor. It'll go to your T cell and say, hey, I have this protein inside of me that's not normal. I need you to check it out. T cells activate, all is good. So it activates endogenous proteins, which is seen a lot in viruses. Don't viruses go into the cell? Don't viruses make proteins in the cell? Endogenous proteins? So it's really good against viruses. And MHC class 1, MHC1, presents to CD8 cells, cytotoxic cells. So cytotoxic cells will get the viral antigen and say, oh, all right, that's not normal. I'm gonna go activate and destroy it. Cool. MHC class 2, those are your antigen presenter cells. Structure's a little bit different. You have two chains, and they are identical. All right. You have one that's an alpha chain, one that's a beta chain. So looks structurally different. It's helped by an invariant chain. Is 2 Chainz still a popular rapper? I don't think he's made a song in like years. So it's helped by the invariant chain. Structurally, you need to know these two are not the same. These two are not the same. And it presents exogenous proteins. So proteins that are outside of the cell. So it'll pick up these cells. So I'll pick up these proteins outside and say, whoa, 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 that doesn't look normal. I need to present it to my T cell. So I'll pick it up, go into your body, and it kind of does what it does here. It's broken down by endosomes. Broken down, and then is loaded onto a receptor, and that receptor is placed on top of the cell. Right now it looks like this, and it will go to your T cells, say, hey, this is normal, can you check it out? All is well. Your MHC class 2 presents to your CD4. This is called the rule of 8. Rule of 8. Why do they call it the rule of 8? 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 8 is 8. So it's a very easy way to remember what presents to what. What presents to what T cell. Now, these are proteins, exogenous and endogenous proteins. Now, when you present proteins, your B cells and your T cells of your adaptive immune system will activate, especially your T cells. Your T cells love to recognize proteins. I mean, that's what we've been talking about the whole time. If you present polysaccharides, carbs, anything else, I mean, you'll still get a response, but your T cells don't really recognize it as well, and they don't really respond as well. When you present proteins, your T cells activate. We call that thymus-dependent antigens, because your T cells are found in your thymus, right? If you present carbs, your T cells don't activate as much. We call that thymus-independent. That's important because a lot of vaccines, some vaccines don't have a protein subunit, and so your T cells don't activate as well. So you only get your B cells, and you get a little bit weaker response. You might need boosters. And you can help it by attaching a protein onto it. That's something they want you to know in first aid. I didn't bother writing it down because it'll be in my notes. It'll be in my notes. So these receptors will pick up the antigen, put it on top, and present to your T cells. Present to your T cells. Let's kind of see it. All right, let's kind of see what happens. All right, T cell activation. We'll start with your CD4 first, because we said that's your kind of your helper, your manager that helps manage everything. What presents to your CD4? Remember the rule of 8? So if you said MHC2, you'd be absolutely right. So there's a little antigen on there. Let's just draw it anatomically correct. It has 2 identical chains, helped by the invariant chain. Has an antigen on there. And it will present to your CD4. And say, hey, I need your help. There's something not right here. And your CD4 will see that and say, you're absolutely right. That's not one of ours. There must be some sort of bug or pathogen. Now the problem is, because your T cells are so important to your immune system, and if you get it wrong, you get an autoimmune disease, and you don't want that. It says, I need another signal. All right, I need another signal just to make sure. I need 2 signals just to make sure. We call that a co-stimulatory signal. Your T cells and your B cells are your adaptive immune system because they're so important. They need 2 signals to activate. That way you don't, inadvertently activate and attack yourself. So this is the first signal it presents. All right, number 1. And the second signal, it has a receptor, B7, that will connect to a receptor under your CD4 called CD28. B7 of your antigen presenter cell connects to CD28 of your CD4. And that is your co-stimulatory signal. That's your second signal, just to make sure, So it says, all right, I got my 2 signals, I'm happy. You're absolutely right, there's a pathogen there. I'm gonna go in and do my thing. Your CD4 are your helper T cells, or your managers to stay back and start coordinating everything, right? Coordinating where these cells go, what cells I need to make, what cells I need to make more of, make less of. And how does it do that? Well, like I said, cells don't really have a brain. How does it do that? It releases cytokines. So your CD4 helper cells will release cytokines. It'll release IL-2. Actually, all your T cells release IL-2, and that stimulates basically all immune cells, really. It stimulates all immune cells. This is very, very important. It's so powerful. IL-2 stimulates all immune cells. How important could that be, right? So IL-2, you got a new cold. IL-3 works in your bone marrow, again, to rev up cells. So it's really recruiting cells, say, you know what, I gotta take care of this pathogen. I'm gonna really, really recruit all these cells. Now let's talk about the subtypes, T helper 1 and T helper 2. These 2 are constantly in flux, constantly in balance. If you have a lot of Th1, it'll want to suppress Th2. If you have a lot of Th2, it'll want to suppress Th1. Right? They're constantly kind of in flux. So Th1 will release interferon gamma, which activates macrophages and natural killer cells, and will inhibit Th2. Like I said, they're kind of in flux. Th2 will secrete IL-4, which makes more Th2, and inhibits Th1. Again, kind of in flux. Not only does that do that, but it makes your B cells make immunoglobulins E, immunoglobulins G. IL-5 makes immunoglobulin A and recruits eosinophils, which are important for atopic diseases and parasites. And then IL-10. We already talked about what IL-10 does. I'm going to block it right here. I don't want you to cheat. What does IL-10 do? If you said it's an anti-inflammatory, like TGF-beta, gold star. Decrease inflammation. So Th1 is very important for including macrophages and natural killer cells. Th2, T helper 2s, are very important for atopic diseases, right? You have IgE, you have eosinophils. Whoa. It's very important for atopic diseases. Something you should keep in mind, hint, hint. So really, your CD4 helper cells, they do so much. They're coordinating so much. They're coordinating macrophages, natural killer cells. They're coordinating immunoglobulins. They're doing all this stuff. And in things like HIV and AIDS, you take out your CD4s. You take out your CD4s, I mean, gosh, you're throwing a monkey wrench in your adaptive immune system. That's why their immune system's so shot, because they're taking out CD4s. So CD4s are very, very important. So that is your CD4. Now let's talk about CD8. We didn't forget about CD8. Your CD8 needs to get activated. So what presents to your CD8? If you said MHC1, you'd be correct. Remember, rule of 8s. Presents to it. And that's the first signal. It needs another signal. It needs that co-stimulatory signal. And the co-stimulatory signal is usually IL-2 from your CD4. So it makes IL-2. And that activates all immune cells. Say, that's my second signal, totally on it. I'm gonna go towards the cells and destroy it. It doesn't even make all this, right? It's a cytotoxic cell. It just goes in and destroys it. If for whatever reason you don't get a co-stimulatory signal, then your cells say, I'm not gonna activate unless I get that second signal. I'm way too important. I don't want to cause an autoimmune disease. I'm not gonna activate. It goes to this less reactive state called anergy. So if you don't get a co-stimulatory signal, you go into energetic state. Now I just want to quickly recap the cytokines. That's probably the place where most people get caught up. The cytokines that we talked about. What decreases inflammation? Pause the video, tell me what decreases inflammation. Please do this, all right? You gotta make sure you're able to pull these up right away. I'm gonna erase this. I don't want you to cheat. I wanna erase these. So tell me what causes decreased inflammation. If you said IL-10, TGF-beta, you'd be right. You'd be right. What is released by all T cells? T cells. Pause the video, tell me what's released by all T cells. Golly. Let me erase that too. If you said IL-2, IL-3, you're absolutely correct. What does your TH1 release? What does your TH1 release? Releases interferon gamma, all right? What is it inhibited by? What inhibits TH1? It's inhibited by IL-4, made by TH2, and then IL-10, of course, right? TH2, what does TH2 release, and what does that do? Releases IL-4. What does IL-4 do? Makes more TH2, inhibits TH1, and makes IgE and G. IL-5, what does that do? All right, I think that's enough time. IL-5 makes IgA, eosinophils. And it also makes IL-10, which we already talked about. What inhibits TH2? What inhibits TH2? It'd be interferon gamma. Absolutely right. That does it for our first immunology block. We talked about innate immune system, adaptive immune system, and then all you need to know about T cells. Hope you enjoyed the video. In the next video, we'll talk about B cells. Thanks.